Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am Councilwoman Felicia Porter, representing the 10th District and Chairperson of the Public Health and Environment Committee. This is a reminder to mute all cell phones or turn them off. Also joining us today are Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we also have Councilman Zach Blanchard of the 11th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
This committee is reconvening a hearing for LO 25-0017, Zero Waste, for the purpose of assessing the City of Baltimore's progress towards achieving its zero waste goals as outlined in Baltimore's Sustainability Plan, examining the effectiveness of current waste reduction, recycling, and composting programs, and evaluating challenges in the implementation and enforcement, and exploring opportunities for improvement and investment in today's sustainable waste management infrastructure. I don't have any opening remarks this morning. We have a lot to talk about, and so I am going to turn it over to Director Garbark to go forth with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am Matt Garbark, Director of Baltimore City's Department of Public Works. I'm joined by Ava Richardson, Director of the Office of Sustainability for the city, as well as other members of the DPW team. We have a presentation that we are going to go through. We have a number of different topics we are going to cover, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions. With that, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Richardson to start us off.
All right, thank you so much, Director Garbark, and thank you, Chairwoman Porter and members of the committee. Good morning again. Ava Richardson, Sustainability Director in the city's Department of Planning, Office of Sustainability. So to get started on the presentation, really just wanted to provide a high-level overview of what we'll be covering today. We want to kind of like revisit the definition of zero waste and some of the different terms that we're using and what it is that we mean we are trying to accomplish when we talk about zero waste specifically. We'll, Director Garbark will provide an overview of some of the infrastructure and recycling, and then we'll also hear from other members of the DPW team in terms of some of the specific yard waste diversion and food scrap diversion efforts that are going on. So on the next slide, we kind of have this image of waste that really, again, gets at the point of what it is that we see when we see a kind of like a dumpster truck or have you full of materials. We really want to eliminate the notion of the concept of waste. So when we see this particular image, we see a particular mattress that was not transitioned into the proper type of infrastructure to recycle those materials. We see cardboard, we see other types of furniture, we see valuable materials that were lost to our economy that we will actually not get back. Particularly if we landfill or incinerate these materials. And so when we talk about zero waste, we really want to get past this notion of waste management and get into the notion of not just zero waste planning, but fostering a circular economy so that we are seeing the benefits both for our communities, but as well as for the environment in terms of how we are closing the loop on specifically hard to recycle materials. You can go to the next slide, where we highlight how the topic of waste is covered in several citywide plans, including the Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan, which links very specifically to the sustainability plan that addresses increasing recycling, diverting organics, policy change such as a foam ban and a plastic bag ban, as well as litter reduction. Our 2024 Climate Action Plan also has a waste section that specifically talks about different strategies to support waste reduction and waste diversion. A lot of that is focused on organics as well, because it is such a big portion of our waste stream. And then in 2018, the food waste recovery strategy was released. This particular strategy had over 70 recommendations for achieving an 80 to 90% food waste reduction diversion goal within different sectors. And those sectors included residential, schools, and other institutions. And then in our 2023 Disaster Preparedness and Planning Project, or DP3, we outline specific strategies to protect critical waste infrastructure. So we know, especially with the most recent storms, when we have major disaster events or climate extremes, a lot of our critical waste infrastructure can be impacted, especially when it comes to logistics. And so we want to take particular strategies to fortify that infrastructure and the operational needs, particularly when emergency events can impact those events. So on the next slide, In our climate action plan, as well as in the city's sustainability plan, we update the status of each of those actions on an annual basis, and we measure that progress on a 5-point scale. Sorry, I'm a little close. We measure that progress on a 5-point scale. And so, as you can see here, some of these particular actions are still in the still pending phase. And that's a reflection of, one, the plan is new. It was initiated or launched in 2024, and some of this progress we know DPW is making currently, and they'll share more specific updates. And so in the coming years, we expect to see a lot of this progress move forward significantly, but we do see when it comes to the introduction of citywide composting, that is in the mid stages of implementation. There's a lot of progress that you'll learn about in regards to that today, and then also exploring some of the energy reduction and efficiency as relates to some of the waste infrastructure across the city. So on the next slide, this again kind of really depicts that zero waste hierarchy where we really want to focus on those strategies at the top of this inverted hierarchy, this inverted pyramid. So we want to begin with rethinking and redesigning our waste system. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about some specific strategies related to that. But in the previous hearing, we talked about a few policy strategies and recommendations to consider, such as extended producer responsibility strategies that really transitions that responsibility for managing the life cycle of waste onto the producers in the private sector that make the waste, but we're typically paying for that in the public sector through taxpayer dollars. And so we really want that to shift because that's an inequity and that's a burden that we're taking on as local governments, which we should not be. We want to also support behavior change modification that encourages waste reduction as well as reuse among different sectors as well as among different target populations. So when we talk about reduction and reuse, a lot of that happens in the home. It also happens in institutions and businesses as well when we think of food-facing entities. It also happens when we think of kind of the training and coordination that would need to happen in order to ensure that whether it's restaurants or large universities or hospitals are able to train their respective staff that manage these processes. We also want to support and increase recycling and composting as well as material recovery. And we really don't want to see waste reaching the bottom of this inverted pyramid. We don't want to incinerate waste and we don't want to landfill waste. Throughout history as humans, we've been burning and burying our waste throughout history. And we're in a time right now where we really realize that has to change. We can't continue to do that, both because of the environmental impacts, but also it's not the smartest way to manage those critical and valuable resources. On the next slide, we have a few, again, terms that we just want to make sure we're all on the same page as. One that I'll highlight is circular economy. So when we talk about that, we're, again, looking more broadly at all the material flows in and out of our economy and our systems, and really thinking about when we consider specific materials such as food waste, such as organics, plastics or metals, or for that matter, again, some of the hard to recycle materials such as mattresses or tires. How are we ensuring that there is a usable application for these materials? And it really is material specific. The way that we support a circular economy for textiles is very different for tires or for metals that require very different manufacturing processes and have different applications and considerations in terms of the recyclability of products. A circular economy goes beyond recycling, and I want to make a point that things are only recyclable when someone wants to buy them, when there's a market to sell them to. And if that doesn't happen, then oftentimes these materials that could have been recycled, they are going into our waste stream. Also want to define what we mean when we say zero waste. That is a 90% diversion from our waste systems. And so that means 90% of materials are being diverted away from landfilling and incineration. And as a part of this process, we know we need to see things like food rescue happening, where we see more food donations instead of food going to feed landfills and incinerators. I talked a little bit about extended producer responsibility, but again, you know, more of those laws and strategies that place the burden, the economic burden for stewarding our waste where it should be in the private sector. Stewardship laws are very similar to extended producer responsibility, but it really looks at how do we ensure there's proper stewardship of specific types of materials such as electronic waste, especially when we know some types of waste have very serious environmental implications. And then climate change behaviors or climate behavior change. We really need to see thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people across the city engaging in millions of daily positive climate behaviors in order to see this action or this progress take place. And so, happy to answer any questions about these particular turns. And then on the next slide, we have the information about Less Waste, Better Baltimore. So I'll turn it back to Director Garbark.
Thank you very much, Director Richardson. So getting into some of the more operational specifics of zero waste and what we're working on. The Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan was a operational plan that the city adopted in 2019. It sets an 83% measurable diversion benchmark. So as Director Richardson mentioned, the zero waste goal is 90%. What this plan was able to identify was 83% of materials that could be diverted in our waste stream. The remaining 7% reflects waste that is difficult to directly measure, identify, and actually determine what type of diversion or other markets might exist for that. So the actual diversion depends really on timing, as well as funding levels and overall participation rates of those who are part of the residents and customers that we work with. I'll be honest, disposing of materials as trash is too cheap and it's too easy. And that is one of the reasons why it is becoming so important for us to move forward with zero waste. We have to rethink how we deal with our waste, or as Director Richardson said, stop thinking of it as waste and thinking of it as commodities that retain value that we can reuse, reduce, or divert to other purposes. Incentives favor throwing things away, which for Baltimore City ends up in the incinerator. The incinerated ash then goes into our landfill, which the capacity is reducing drastically every year. Fully recognizing this plan and advancing zero waste requires investment in both physical infrastructure as well as in behavior change. Residential programs are more straightforward to implement with funding, but there are other areas where there's going to require cross-agency as well as cross-jurisdictional work, especially talking with our state partners on some laws to change producer responsibility as well as other behavior from those who are some of the largest contributors. Most of the waste facilities are also privately owned. It is not the city's landfill. These are private-owned waste facilities, and that's going to be outside of city limits that we can actually deal with and actually direct. In terms of residential diversion rates, this is a chart that is looking at the diversion that is within our domain of control. So DPW manages waste and recycling collection from single-family residential homes. The slide shows diversion rates of diverted tonnage compared to these totals. For 2025, residential diversion rate was 13.8%. This encompassed around 24,000 tons that had been diverted. To reach 83% of a measurable target, we need to grow this to almost 500,000 tons to deal with that. In terms of our landfill, all of our waste ends up there, either directly or indirectly. Directly if it's taken there, indirectly if it's burned, and then the ash is taken there. The current capacity of our landfill is 18.3 million cubic yards. As of 2025, 16.5 million cubic yards has been used, leaving approximately 1.8 million cubic yards remaining. We project that the landfill will reach its capacity in February 2028. The planned expansion will add at most 14 years of life. However, without incineration, which reduces the volume 80 to 85%, that will drop to 5 years. Also, the state of Maryland does not permit any new landfills, so once the expansion is reached, there is no possibility to add landfill capacity in Baltimore or actually anywhere in the state of Maryland. So this highlights the reason why diversion is so critical to preserving the remaining capacity that we have. The tipping fee increases that were instituted, which this body approved as part of the budget last year, have been really helpful in reducing the tonnage at our landfill. We have seen almost a 50% drop, which is helping capacity, and it shows how urgent those increases were actually needed. In terms of disposal, the vast majority of city-managed waste goes to our incinerator, as I mentioned. Reduces the volume of tonnage by 80 to 85%. This preserves landfill space. The ash is then landfilled at the Quarantine Road landfill, and for 2025, 58,242 tons of city waste went directly to the Quarantine Road landfill. 136,249 tons of ash came from the Wind Waste incinerator to the landfill. Now, Wind Waste contract is expected to expire in 2031. Because of this volume, we will require that 136,000 would be well over 300,000 tons that we would have to be landfilled. So that adds up exponentially to why we reduce the 14-year lifespan of the expansion to less than 5 years. This would be costly financially as well as in terms of carbon emissions if we just landfilled everything. Because from landfills, we end up releasing methane gas, which is one of a top contributor to greenhouse gas and climate change. Now, we've talked a little bit about our long haul study. It's the reason we call it long haul has a couple of different meanings. First, it was talking about, having the capacity to send some of our materials to other markets throughout the country. But we realized when we went to the Planning Commission, also it's important because we're in it for the long haul. So this is sort of the long haul plan to figure out how we can actually move this forward. So it became evident after what I just told you that investing in a landfill expansion at the rate of $75 million or more may not be the most cost-effective and cost-efficient investment for our waste reuse and disposal. So what we have done is we have worked to get a contractor on board to look at other alternatives to landfilling. This is going to encompass many different things, including looking at a rail transfer facility and station that, as I mentioned, can take debris and materials throughout the country to any market that may exist. Also looking at construction of, or a construction and demolition facility, because 40% of our waste currently is C&D materials. So if there is a way to remove that or take that out, that will reduce the volume of our waste almost 40%. The other idea is a material recovery facility, or what's called a MRF. There's very many different types of MRFs that you can use. Some are called dirty MRFs, where you throw everything in the trash on it and sort it. Others are MRFs for just recycled products. But the idea there is to recover what you can from these materials and then create a market for them from that purpose. Also looking at potential for a second transfer station and as expansion of some of our current facilities, such as our composting facility we're planning at Bowleys Lane, as well as the Reed Bird improvements that we're currently working on. The study is underway. It's expected to be completed this summer. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about our single stream recycling, which after a year of hiatus has come back in full force. So as you all know, we have continued to distribute blue recycling carts for our recycling operations. This has increased our recycling usage tremendously because now there is an access and a receptacle for this material to be put in. We've also standardized our training for our staff, and this has resulted in, I believe they've been passed out as our OOPS tags, which have started going out on the recycling receptacles, which indicate what is, why recycling was not collected. And its intent is an educational tool so that our crews can explain to the public why that material was not acceptable as recycling. We've also made improvements to our routing software, so we've made our routes more efficient and more effective so that we can cover more space and pick up more material. And we are also tracking contamination. We've trained the staff at the Northwest Transfer Station where all of our recycling goes. It is then containerized and taken to the processing facility in Jessup. But before it is actually put into those tractor trailers, our crews at the Northwest Transfer Station actually have gone in and started sorting it. This has reduced our contamination from 21% in 2024, to 15% in 2025. Looking at some of the upcoming issues and updates that we're working on, we are creating a contamination dashboard that is going to be based by route. It's also going to be based by neighborhood. We're going to be conducting targeted door-to-door knocking for high contamination areas to make sure the residents and the neighborhoods and communities are aware of recycling contamination and the do's and don'ts of putting things in recycling. And we will continue our solid waste CIP projects, specifically Reedbird and Bowleys Lane. Bowleys Lane is where our compost facility is going to be established, and we're going to continue working on those. Design is in progress, and we hope to be in construction with those shortly, within the next year or so. We will evaluate city-owned material recovery facilities as part of the long haul study, and we will examine what could be expanded to businesses and multifamily units. As I mentioned earlier, that is a huge area of waste generation and disposal that the city doesn't have any influence or involvement over. At this point, I am going to ask DPW's Director of Marketing and Communications, Tiara Brown, to go over some of our more targeted communications efforts. Tiara?
Thank you. So when we talk about communications for zero waste, our comm strategy is focused on education. We focus on the clear, simple, repeatable messages. So in our latest tactics, we've expanded our storytelling through a PSA campaign. So we focused on the basics of contamination, working with WJZ focus on a PSA video that highlighted contamination, the do's and don'ts, and the rights of recycling. So that aired on local and streaming platforms. We also worked with WBAL on a sponsored article, The Battle Against the Blue Bin, that focused on the real-life consequences of contamination. And we also boosted our social posts, our Clean It, Contain It, Curb It social content that you might remember from our resumption of weekly recycling campaign, and that's ongoing on all of our social networks. Next slide. So we also want to share with you our education on the next generation of our zero waste leaders through our Eco Warriors program. We currently have 90+ participating schools in Eco Warriors. To date, they've submitted 74 sustainable events that have been recorded across all participating schools, and that's elementary, middle, and high school. Students focus on launching projects to earn points and ultimately to win prize funding. And this is our program that builds lifelong environmental stewards and not just focusing on short-term compliance. Next slide. And then our latest and our grassroots efforts are the Eco Loop events. So we are focusing on in-person engagement. We believe that it strengthens trust and understanding. Our Eco Loop events showcase hands-on zero waste resources and activities. 3 events we've hosted so far. Our most recent event was in Harlem Park Recreation Center right before the winter storm, and we had a really great turnout, over 100 participants. And our next event is scheduled for May in Patterson Park. And I just wanted to go into the next slide, please. I wanted to highlight a bit of what we've learned through these tactics. So residents do respond to clear messaging and in-person engagement. Community-based tactics resonate more than passive outreach, and education-first marketing increases awareness and participation. We plan to build and expand on those tactics. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Tiara. Getting back into some more of the nitty-gritty of what we're working on for the future, I'll talk about our yard waste diversion program that we're standing up. So currently, residents can take their yard waste to our recycling centers. They can put it among their curbside collection or on special Monday collections during the fall or right after the holidays. You can create special 311 requests where our trucks go and pick it up. What happens is that this is taken to the incinerator, and it is incinerated into ash, which is then taken to the landfill. So basically, it defeats the purpose of having a yard waste program to do exactly what we would do normally without a yard waste program. So thanks to this body, last year you provided a $750,000 level of funding for a pilot program for yard waste collection. And this is something that we're really, really excited about, and we've thought a lot about it. So the plan is to place dedicated roll-offs at the residential recycling centers, as well as at the Quarantine Road landfill. We're also going to stand up a pilot program that's a curbside pilot program that is going to be 311 based to begin with. So basically, residents will be able to call 311 and crews will come around, take the yard waste, take it to the Quarantine Road landfill where it will be chipped and stored, and then we will take it to a composting facility. There's one in Baltimore County, there's also one in Prince George's County. The hope is that that's only going to be a couple-year requirement because we're going to have our own facility within the next couple years. So where those costs break out, the vast majority of it is obviously in labor and personnel costs. We are hiring 4 crews. This will consist of 2 solid waste workers as well as 1 commercial driver. Luckily, we do not need any new vehicles. We have what are called mini load packers, which are not in use anymore thanks to the investment in our fleet. So we are going to be able to use those vehicles to stand this program up. We're also going to hire a supervisor as well as 2 tractor trailer drivers. The positions, luckily and thankfully, are on the Board of Estimates next week, and we've already begun recruiting. The plan for this is that we are looking to offer these positions to some of our more seasoned and veteran employees. We believe that this is going to be a little less taxing than some of the other work, and it's going to require people who know what they're doing and can be able to adjust if need be, since this is a pilot program. So we think that it'd be good to have people who know the system, know the process, and can get going right away. So we think we'll be able to recruit for this as part of our larger recruitment, which this council also provided funding for 45 new crews for our curbside collection programs in general. We're doing the recruitment all as one so that we can get all of the workers in together as soon as we can. Outside of the personnel costs, the remaining costs are for communications, public outreach, tipping fees, which we have to pay to the compost facility, whichever one we choose, as well as equipment and other various materials. Now, looking beyond 2026, we want to maintain this investment. So we are not going to hire people just for them to not have funding next year. So we're working on building this out into a longer, more sustainable program. The future is going to look at additional roll-offs so that we can have more capacity, as well as additional crews so that we can stand this up and better reflect that. This, combined with what I'll talk about in a minute, our food scrap program, is going to be the basis for what we hope is going to be a curbside organics and compost collection effort, basically a third routine services collection. That is our ultimate goal. We need to figure out the feasibility of that. We need to understand the demand and the work, and quite honestly, get our compost facility up and running before we can actually do that. But this is one piece of that 2-piece approach to how we're going to be working on that. So talking about the food waste reduction, looking at 2 phases of that. So the first phase is really looking at communications, and marketing to better understand and inform our residents of how they can reduce their food waste. This is really about public education, and it's really about looking at various concepts that are known to work, that can be promoted, and that we can do effective outreach to start talking about changing behavior. This will involve investments in media as well as in community engagement efforts to highlight these various behaviors. Getting into the phase 2 approach, this is where we actually get into a collections pilot program. So phase 2 of the program involves a 1-year curbside food waste collection pilot. We're looking to include 500 households. We need that level of participation to create demand, because we have to see whether routes can work and how they work and what that capacity is. We're also going to include 10 schools in that pilot program. That is a huge, huge area where food scraps can be diverted and brought into this program. We're going to need to procure bins for distribution, as well as a vendor to process the food scraps into a compost facility. So similar to the yard waste, until we get our facility up and running, we're going to have to pay a tipping fee to actually dispose of these. And again, the intent of the pilot is to look at messaging as well as logistics to help build out a curbside collection program. The last thing we want is for this bin to be just another trash bin or a recycling bin. And it's taken a long time to get the recycling to a point where it's getting better, but for a long time it was viewed as a second trash bin. So we need to understand and be very clear about what can and can't go into this. And the data that we're going to collect from this is going to be absolutely critical to scaling this model up. So in terms of the budget for this, the total budget we are looking for everything is about $550,000. Phase 1 is the expected cost for marketing and communications. And phase 2 is $350,000, $135,000 for communications and outreach, and then $170,000 for the curbside pilot. This would be for collections, the bins, and the tipping fees. And again, it is not that much because it is a small pilot. It is only 500 households. And then $45,000 for participation from the 10 schools that we're talking about. Now, all of this I mentioned sort of as the beginning of a much broader, larger discussion, and that's about organics and the organic diversion of organic material from our waste stream. So we estimate that there's about 42,800 tons per year of organic material that is in our waste stream. That organic material does not need to be there. And if you look at the very, very tiny little green sliver, that is the portion that we are currently diverting. The orange portion shows the diversion under the food scrap and the yard waste program. The rest of that is what we need to build to, because all of these organics can be diverted. And it is critical for zero waste potential to grow this to a point where we can accommodate the rest of that graph. And this has the potential for our compost facility to start off with 14,000 tons per year, and to grow to 24,000 tons per year. So even at our maximum with the compost facility, and again, we look to grow in the future and scale, but even with the maximum, that'll only be about half of the potential diversion efforts. So getting the word out about diverting, not throwing away, and other options for what can be done with organic material is really going to be crucial, because all of this material now is incinerated and put into our landfill, and it does not have to be. It could be compost, it can be other reusable material for which a strong market exists out there. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can. I have my team here who may be able to answer questions if I can't, so I'd be happy to engage in any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'd also like to recognize Councilman James Torrance, who just joined. All right, so colleagues, we'll have about 2 questions per round. I have a few questions, but I'm going to start with members first. And so, Councilman Conway, did you want to ask your questions first?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Director, I'm really happy to see the progress that you guys are making on zero waste. I remember the last meeting we had on this, we weren't quite where we wanted to be, and I think we still have a lot of work to do, but it seems like we are actively working to implement some of the things we've been talking about for years, and I just want to commend you guys for that. It looks like things are moving in the right direction, and it gives me hope that even if we don't 100% to get to zero waste, that we are making significant progress, and we're at least trying hard and doing things that we've never done before to change the way that we deal with waste in the city. My first question is around the breakdown. Director, you gave a breakdown of the zero waste hierarchy in the beginning, and I saw a bunch of percentages, and otherwise it was the inverted pyramid. And I was curious right now how that breakdown looks. What percentage of trash falls in each of those respective areas? I know we have that information, but I would love to see that in like a very tight and finite way.
Yeah, we can get that. We can certainly look at that. I am sorry to say it is probably the reverse of the inverted pyramid.
Yeah.
I will be completely open of that.
Yeah.
So the goal is to turn it upside down. Right. But yes, we can certainly work to get that information.
Yeah, and I think, so I appreciate, can we make that an official request of the committee? Just this pyramid here, and I think it's that bottom piece, recycle, compost, material recovery, so on and so forth. That'd be really helpful.
If I can just add one more point to that, I think for the rethink and the redesign piece, I just remind everyone, there was an extended producer responsibility legislation passed at the state level. So we know we'll see a significant amount of progress from that, as well as the organics waste diversion legislation at the state level. There's no easy way to determine the percentage of that's actually being rethought or redesigned at this point. And so yeah, as the Director Garbark said, we are not where we want to be in terms of where those numbers are reflected. But I think for some of those higher pieces, it's a little bit hard to give you specifics, just to provide that context.
Yeah.
But for the bottom ones, we can do that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My other question was in line with the conversation that you guys kind of went down a little bit around incentives here. So right now, you were very blunt, and I appreciate that. I like blunt people. You said it's too cheap to burn our trash. And I think that's why we have continued to lean very heavily on the Wheelabrator for so long and have not yet figured out what it might take for us to do otherwise. To that effect, I'm really curious what we can do to change that incentive. Right now, we don't think of our recycling as money. We don't think of our compost as money. We don't think of our trash as money. And the reality is it is. All these materials, or almost all these materials, can be reused in some way, shape, or form. We just have not improved our systems in order to put those materials in the right hands, in the right condition. So I know we talked in the past, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that we do this, but there are probably other ways to do this. We talked about pay-as-you-throw. We talked about ways to create incentives for residents to waste less, to put less into the trash stream and more into the recycling stream, and potentially, when we get to the point that we can provide it across the city, more into the compost stream. I'm curious what opportunities we might have, save as you throw or waste as you throw. I can't remember the name of the idea that we had, but you guys know what I'm going for. That is one idea. Are there other opportunities that we've seen across the country where there has been a change in incentives, either for residents or for the city, so that we're not needlessly burning materials or needlessly putting materials into a landfill?
So the first piece of that is the economics and the market for alternatives, and that's very sparing in this region right now. This region is very heavily dependent on trash disposal, landfilling, incineration, a lot of that. You go further west, the land is a lot more expensive. They don't want to use it for landfills. So there's a lot more incentives, a lot more programs. That's where the long haul study is going to come out, because as part of the investment that we're looking in the landfill, there are possibilities to look at partnering with the private sector to start creating that market. Because if the market doesn't exist, it is going to be even more expensive to throw it out. And that's the financial reality of our budget as a city, as a state, that if there are no markets that exist for this other material, it's just going to be too expensive to really focus on them. So how can we start driving that change there? The biggest thing is people are going to want and will divert if it's easy and it's not expensive for them. Alternatively, they're going to divert if you make it a disincentive, if you make it more expensive to throw away. I don't think we're at that point yet of pay as you throw, where the more you put in your trash, the higher you pay, because I don't think we have a market set up for this other material. Once we have that, once we have these supply streams that we can actually start creating revenue on, or actually working with the private sector to create jobs and to open this market up, because this is basically a recession-proof industry. I mean, you're never gonna run out of stuff. So there's a tremendous amount of potential. There's a lot of discussion with private interests that have started happening, and I think we're right on the cusp of starting to move that needle a little bit. But the first piece is really the market, and getting those markets in place and that economy there for this material, and then figuring out how we make it easy for folks, and for the remaining folks who just refuse or don't want to do it, that's when we have to start looking at the disincentives. If we can stand up a curbside collection program where it's just a third bin and people know I put this and this, this and this and this and that, and it starts getting into their knowledge base, it is going to be, we're going to see a lot of change overnight with that. That we won't get everyone, but that's when we'll have to start talking about those disincentives.
Yeah. I think about this in part, I was looking at the back of the OOPSI sheet. I like the OOPSI sheet because
Yes.
When we had a chance to go out there and do the recycling route, we saw a lot of OOPSIs. And what I noticed was everything kind of goes into recycling, and we're still doing great work to educate folks on that matter. But what also came to mind for me is things that people might want to recycle or reuse in some capacity. I often think cell phones,
Yes.
computers. I have kids, so I can't tell you how many kids' toys I have that have batteries and that end up, a year or two later in the trash, but can't really be recycled in our system today. So it makes me wonder, these are things that we should be thinking about, not necessarily resolving yet. I think we have bigger opportunities with yard waste and with food waste and so on and so forth. But as we think about those things down the line, being prepared to find ways to reuse.
And I think that's where Director Richardson's point on the producer responsibility comes in, that a lot of these producers create products that have no ability to be reused or recycled. And quite honestly, if you've ever seen reports of some of our trucks catching on fire, that's because of exactly that. Something is thrown in the trash, and when we compress it, it explodes or it ruptures. So it's very dangerous to do that, not to mention what leaches into the ground. Or in the incinerator, you can have, obviously it's burning, but that's still unsafe. So I think that's where it really comes to that top level on that inverted pyramid, about changing producer responsibility to create those options to recycle and reuse those.
Thank you.
If I can just add one more point to that. In addition to the market-based solutions that Director Garbar spoke about, there's also a lot going on at the state right now, especially when it comes to things like paint stewardship that Delegate Boyce got passed a few years ago. There's electronics recycling or stewardship that the city has reported years in the past and is supporting this year. So we are seeing some of that legislation come up at the state level. If we don't see passages at the state level, I think it's worth it's it merits kind of like, what does that mean for local implications? We know there's a bottle deposit bill at the state level. So these things will, you know, being very precise about these market-based solutions and the types of materials that we're trying to divert, and if and when we have an opportunity to support that statewide diversion or that statewide initiative, it really does benefit the region beyond the city, as well as better implementation of some of these initiatives that don't stop at our borders.
Thank you so much, Director. Councilwoman Ramos?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has come up in a lot of different ways. Obviously, with the work on the Sisson Street Task Force, all of the zero waste work has integrated into those discussions, which I think is really important. And I know we'll have a separate conversation about that. But I wanted to. Your presentation really focused on the yard waste and the composting, which I appreciate because those seem to be where you're ready to ramp up, right? And I wanted to just let folks know I am still working on getting composting back at the Waverly Market. I have an innovative solution and I'm really excited about it. So we'll be announcing that fairly soon, but I'm really excited about the partnership that we're including there, which could be a model for the Baltimore market, by the way. So that's, you know, another piece that I think will help because it was very popular at the Waverly Market. So I anticipate bringing that back this spring. Super excited about it. But the other piece is, and you mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of other materials that need to be taken out of the landfill and reused. And so I've been working on a construction and demolition bill, and I was really excited to see in the capital budget that you've already started. You talked about it in the capital budget as a waste diversion facility, but we've talked about it as a specific C&D facility, so that construction and demolition waste could be brought, sorted, and then folks can come and buy basically from there. And we've identified a place for it, which would be great. So I'm excited about that, and hopefully we can come to a place where we can make some announcements about that fairly soon. So do you have a time frame on that? I mean, the capital budget says 3 or 4, 5 years that will be up and running.
That is, I think, that is one of the components of the long haul study.
Okay.
So we're going to get that back this summer, and that's really looking at the potential and what it's going to be high level numbers of what it would cost, but that's really where that's going to come from, is once we get the results of that back.
Okay.
And that'll be this summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I look forward to following up on that as I work on my legislation and we work together on that. Okay, great. The second question is around the bottle piece. And where there is a bottle deposit bill in Annapolis again. I'm hopeful this time, but we'll see. My understanding is that there's, we have to do something here. Like when we talk about incentives for people to recycle, we can still keep our curbside, but actually paying people to put bottles elsewhere is going to help. And right now, there is a big market for glass. The glass folks that need glass. And so we should be like rushing to figure out how to get them our glass rather than having it in the medians, in the curbs, in bins that it doesn't belong in, et cetera. So can we talk a little bit about where we are on our own, you know, it's not going to be, it may not be a bottle deposit, we'll figure it out. But my understanding is that there is an RFI out there to at least explore this. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. So, Councilwoman Ramos, yes, we've had conversations about this, and I think we both testified on the state bill to support the bottle deposit bill.
Which I support wholeheartedly, and I hope that it passes, absolutely.
And, you know, fingers crossed. So I think when we've talked in the past, we've acknowledged that, you know, the economies of scale isn't here to do a local bottle deposit bill. And we had some conversations with some kind of like reverse vending machine partners, if you will. I think in terms of your point, in terms of like glass diversion specifically, or for that matter, like what we can do locally, it is a budget issue. I don't believe, I'm not familiar with an RFI.
The RFI has been released.
Okay.
By
through the Northeast Maryland
Recycling Authority.
the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority. I don't have information on that. I will defer to my other DPW colleagues, but I do want to just add a couple of additional points there. I do think it is a budget issue, and when it came up in the past, as Director Garbark kind of like outlined, when it came to the $750,000 that was awarded by this body to support yard waste initiatives, and then the additional $500,000 or so, $5,000 that would be needed to support food waste diversion. This is the type of thing where we really have to think about it from a budgetary perspective. Even the responses from the RFI, I think like if there are great proposals, how we pay for that is critical, and I'm not sure that we have like
Those are where the PPPs come in. That will be amazing. Yes.
Councilwoman, I'm going to ask Kara from our team to talk a little bit about that.
Great, thank
And if
you.
you could just introduce yourself before you, press the button. Press the button.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Kara Murray. I'm a program analyst in the Office of Waste Diversion, and I can provide a little bit of context on the RFI. That is in process. We put together like a scope of work, so to speak, for that RFI, just a set of parameters to gather information. It was just basically an information gathering. We have released that through the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority, and we're starting to get questions coming back. So there is a, I guess, quote unquote proposer who has sent us some very detailed questions about this that basically are trying to figure out how to respond to our efforts and give us something back. So we will expect something back from the RFI in a few weeks. And we're gonna be going back and forth with answering those questions about how this proposed program would work with the bottle bill if it were passed. Like, what are our plans for, do we want to do reverse vending machines where it's like one at a time bottles, or do we want to do like a bag drop program, kind of things like that. So we're going back and forth and trying to answer those questions, and we'll get more information in a few weeks.
When does that due again? I mean, one of the, I'd have to look, I need to look at my notes, but it'll be a follow-up, I think, to this, and maybe I'll make that a committee request just to follow up on the bottle RFI at our next meeting to have some more details about that. The RFI is the request for information regarding the recycling of bottles and collection of bottles, and actually paying people for their bottles of glass, plastic, and aluminum.
And so, Councilwoman, let me just provide a succinct statement to that. So it's an official committee request related to the RFI for the bottle deposit engagement strategy?
No, it would be specifically about what the department has asked for in the RFI, which is if we don't have basically a bottle bill, what can we do in Baltimore City?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's really important. And just side note, I wear a brand of shoes that is all recycled bottles. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say publicly
No
what it is,
worries.
but it's really important that we all start to look at being able to take
And
advantage of it.
Councilwoman?
Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? All right, Councilman Blanchard.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you for letting non-committee members participate in the questioning. I really appreciate that. This is good. Excited to hear. This feels like a lot of positive progress and whatnot. Two questions. One, so Senator Hayes and Delegate Young have a bill in Annapolis that would give Baltimore City more ability to address the tobacco industry products in the city of Baltimore. Obviously, we also have a legislative package on the city side looking at smoke shops, vape shops, and whatnot. And something that I know has come up is, Director, you talked about the batteries and whatnot. Have you noted, what challenges, if any, has DPW noticed either with disposal or with litter and other sort of public health and environmental concerns with vape batteries or similar types of products?
That's a very good question. We can get back to you on that. I don't know if we have that information right off the bat, but I can certainly get back. Obviously, when you look at actual tobacco products that litter the street, we have a big issue with that, but the vape batteries, that's a very interesting question. We will
And
get
if
that.
if there's data, that's great. We've got the set of hearings is coming up towards the end of March, so anytime before that would be,
Absolutely.
Is that an official committee request?
if you don't mind, I would appreciate that.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
perfect. Thank you.
And then the second question, so also very excited about the curbside composting pilot and whatnot. Can you just talk me through how did we get to the number of, where does 500 households and 10 schools for the pilot, where did that come from?
So it's a mix of A, funding, and B, what we need to statistically be able to create density. And it could be more than 500, it could be less than 500. But the idea is to get households where we can create routes. And we've thought that 500 was enough to create different routes in different areas of the city to see how difficult or how easy it is to actually create a curbside program. So 500 was the idea. If it turns out we need more than that, then we'll do more. Obviously, the more we have, the better the data is going to be, but obviously the more expensive it is. That's kind of why we settled on the 500.
Okay, thank you, Director. I would love to go out and door knock to help get the word out if one of these routes happen to be in the 11th district. So I'm just gonna loft that one up there.
Yes.
But the second one, I think this would also be a committee request. What would the cost be to do this, let's just say quadruple it, right? If it was 2,000 households, it would be, I think, really helpful for the council to know what that additional cost would be.
We can get that,
Madam Chair?
certainly get
Is
that,
that an official committee request as well?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
certainly.
Councilman Torrance?
Good morning, Director. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going back to just old school education. I'm frustrated because we continually have the same issue with recycling, and we have not gone to neighborhoods and started educating and physically putting people in place. The videos are nice, the social media is nice, but physically going to teach someone's grandmother how to actually know what goes into recycling is where we've gotten away from. And from looking at past data and reports from the agency, when we had our highest number of success rate in terms of like what was accepted, it was when we actually had peer educators going into schools and actually community doing it. Why haven't we gone back to that and provide the staff to actually be physically on the ground and actually teaching people how to do this thing? Because that is, I'm strongly believe the return on investment in physical bodies will lead to better acceptance rates, which means that we don't have to deal with the
100%
long-term
agree.
costs.
I'm going to ask Tiara to respond
I
to
can
that.
respond there. I would have to agree with you. The grassroots efforts are essential to kind of laying the groundwork and educating our residents. We do have a small team. They are small but mighty. They are in the schools every week. But we definitely could use more money and backing to expand that team. We desperately need more people.
As a committee request, Madam Chair, I would like to know the current staffing of which schools they're actually servicing. When I was with DPW in 2009, that was a team of 3 that did the entire rollout of the recycling system. So I'm wondering, how are we multiplying forces? Because if 3 people educated an entire city,
Correct.
and then
Absolutely.
if we have the same staffing, then that means that we have not learned what we did prior and made it more efficiencies to do it.
Agree.
We can get that.
And then also, if I had an ideal program for it, what would the cost look like in terms of staffing?
Okay.
I say that because what I'm noticing in my district is on routes where there is recycling bins that are being used for trash cans, it's not being collected, and I'm now seeing dirty alleys. And if we can get on the front end of educating people, we then have cleaner alleys. The places where I see recycling is done correctly, my alleys are perfectly clean, right? The places where I've seen alleys that are bad, I've now seen that they're attached to multifamily dwellings because they don't have proper refuge receptacles or recycling receptacles. So people are using a recycling bins for that receptacle. And this is where I've been pushing your sister agency on finding people until they appropriately have the receptacles for people. But I think education too, because I can't enforce something if I haven't educated people on it in the first place.
100% agree, Councilman, and As part of the food scrap and the yard waste, we do have programs we're going door to door, where we're going to educate folks about yard waste, food scrap, and it'll be also part of just generally how to reuse, how to reduce, how to recycle as part of that. So I 100% agree. We also are using these OOPS tags where we are indicating why something was in the recycling that is contaminated and not, and what it's not there for, and we'll continue to go out to communities, educate folks, and do whatever we can.
That's helpful. I'll come back to it in the next round because I have a question I have to think through. But related to composting, I always had this question that we're late to the game. PG County is now profitable after having their compost facility for more than 7 years. Have we looked at the modeling to know when we hit profitability? Because what I don't want, and I think in the front of it, end of it, we need to educate the public, like we're not going to turn a profit in the first 3, 4, 5 years. And then people, and I just know Baltimore, people are like, why are we doing this thing if we're not going to make money off of it?
Yep.
And if we show scale that like in other cities, that 7-year mark is where they really started seeing a profit because education takes a while. So I would like to see our plans for communicating that to people as a committee request. And then also figuring out where will we begin to scale once we have now started getting the full capacity of the facility. Because it's great to build it, and then if we get to full scale, now we have an overused facility. How do we now build another one? So I just want to know, have we thought that through in terms of the CIP requests?
Great, thank you so much, Councilman.
Yeah, so a couple things real quick. That's part of the pilot programs and the data we're collecting to see about the demand and the supply, and that is going to be critical to maintaining that supply. The backside of that is going to be the market and how we sell it and how we generate that. And that is something we're working through now because we do a lot of things extremely well as a city, but I'm not sure that being part of the market and finding streams and all that is going to be the best use of city resources. So trying to figure out a P3 or something where we can get that, like a MES with Prince George's County, they manage the supply, the end side of it to the market. So yeah, all of that stuff, and we can put it together. But a lot of that's going to be informed by the pilot programs as the data we get.
Great, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go into my 2 questions. My first question has to deal with the civil rights complaint filed by South Baltimore residents regarding the cumulative impacts of waste infrastructure. Can you share how the proposed investment will impact this ongoing complaint? This has been an issue for generations now, and so could you share that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think really important and core to that complaint is the heavy reliance on incineration and the use of the wind waste facility. And we are building these programs, these pilot programs, to scale up alternatives to that. The mayor has been very clear that this is not going to continue. We have to find an alternative to incineration. And all of this is looking at how to actually do that and to bring alternatives to reliance on incineration to the community and to create these other opportunities. So that's a real key to that. The reality is we still need it right now, the incineration. But we're on notice. We know that it's gonna be something that ends and something we have to pivot from, and that's where we're building this now. The other piece is, I'm not sure another expanded landfill in South Baltimore is the best use of our money. I think it could be more productive where we have facilities that might process things, where there are job opportunities to actually create some investment in those communities.
Good. No, that's great to hear. And I will tell you, just from my perspective, we're not into continuing the contract after its deadline. I think that we have an opportunity where we are investing in that infrastructure now so that when we go further, we are not in a crunch like how we were the last time.
Absolutely.
Great. And so just want to be fully clear and transparent in that effect from my
And I've been very
stance.
clear with my team, and the mayor's been very clear with me.
Perfect. My next question actually has to do with capital budget. And so DPW requested $3 million in FY27 of the capital budget, the aerated static pile compost facilities. It's an understanding that it's needed to complete the first phase of the Bowleys Lane composting facility to its 12,000 tons per year capacity that the city received in an EPA grant FY '24 to complete. Is the funding still necessary to complete the Bowleys Lane facility to that amount?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is still necessary to actually build it out because it is being put together with the grant that we received from the federal government.
Perfect. And so with regard to, do you all know why funding recommended against funding for planning for this project?
Say it again?
Department of Planning recommended against funding this project. Do you happen to know why, or what was that conversation?
I think it has to do with the larger Bowleys Lane project
Yes.
and the actual time when construction will begin. I believe it was, we're not looking necessarily at beginning construction this year. It's still all in design. So I think the idea was we don't necessarily need that funding now for construction. It can be built into the future when we actually get closer to that point.
But that funding will still be earmarked for that particular project. So
That
I
is-
don't, what I don't want to be in a situation is that that funding will be repurposed for something else, and then when it comes time to build that aspect of the project, there's no funding.
We're 100% in, and
Okay.
that is part of the actual grant that we received, is we have to provide matching dollars, so it's something we have to do. I think it was more about phasing and when we'll actually, the reality of when we'll actually get to construction.
Perfect, and that's in the grant agreement terms?
There is a cost, a matching amount that we do have to put. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. The next question actually has to deal with, still on that topic, will DPW receive funding for completing this facility's full projected capacity, the 24,000 tons per year, and build other 3 such facilities for the Less Waste Better Baltimore plans to do?
I think ideally, yes. Theoretically, yes. I think the pilot is going to show us the demand, the locations, the feasibility of all of that. One of the big issues is location of these additional facilities. Bowleys Lane was a natural choice. It's a large facility. It's a closed landfill. It's not really around many residential areas. I imagine many residential neighborhoods are not going to want this. One of the things that we are also going to be looking at is potential regional collaboration. Obviously, we're not alone in this need. Baltimore County, Prince George's County, Howard County, and others, and using some of these facilities elsewhere and create more of a regional market, so to speak, to actually use these facilities. But that's going to be all part of this process. The hope is to get to that point.
Yeah.
I just don't know when
I
or
was gonna ask you
what
the
all is
timeline.
exactly. I don't
Okay.
know when yet.
Okay.
It's going to be determined
By the pilot.
by those pilots. Yeah.
Okay, and when is the pilot scheduled for completion?
It's hopefully going to be starting in next fiscal year, fiscal
Yes,
27.
But when will it be completed? So will
1
it
year.
be the whole?
It's
one
going to be
year?
a year of data, yeah.
Perfect.
Because we need to see seasonality and all of that stuff, yeah.
Okay, and so as we go forward into FY '28 budget, we'll be able to see kind of
Oh, yes.
where? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Wonderful. And so the next has to do with landfill tipping fees increase. At the Budget Appropriations Quarterly Budget Hearing on 2/17, BBMR presented that the tonnages of waste deposited at the landfill decreased by 49.2% at the landfill tipping increase that was part of last year's budget. Is there a change in the total tonnage of waste deposited in the QRL, or only a portion of waste brought to the QRL by private haulers?
So that is a portion brought by outside haulers. The ash from Bresco doesn't change.
Okay.
So that remains the same. The 49% are the people who are coming naturally, the haulers and the others who are coming to the landfill to tip. The Bresco agreement is completely separate from that.
So, thank you so much for clarifying that. And so, just to confirm, the tipping fee the tipping fee increase did not apply to ash from Bresco?
Correct.
Okay.
correct.
So if that is the case, then why is that tipping fee relative to the new tipping fee for other private haulers? So what I'm trying to separate is the 2 types of tipping fees and whether there was an increase or not, and why there was an increase in the tipping fee.
Yep, so the Bresco agreement actually included the tipping fees and an escalator in those fees over the course of the 10 years. We actually pay them a tipping fee and then they pay us back.
Yes.
So there's sort of this net reduction in what we're paying, so it wasn't the exact same as just a private hauler coming in and then paying for a tipping fee there. But those were all based on the contract and the agreement, and there's escalators in there. I believe it's 2% or 3% each year.
Okay, that's an official committee request, please. I'm not satisfied with that answer. I would just
Okay.
say that, but I understand the contractual nature of it. I want to have the specifics of that particular contract.
Of course.
Sent to the committee so that we can
Of course.
review it as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, we're gonna go to the next round of questions. Conway?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to follow up on that line. I'll start here. The last slide you put up was the bigger picture for organics, and I was looking at residential organics, and the largest part of that was the white portion, which is we don't yet have a plan for. I'm curious what falls into that white bar.
So basically, it's anything, the bulk of it's going to be food waste, food scraps, excuse me, I need to stop using that term, food scraps and yard waste and yard materials. Other material, anything that is organic, like I believe cardboard, paper products, anything that is derived from organic material can fall into that. There's a whole array of things that are compostable that could go into this category that are currently in the waste stream.
So when I'm looking at this, this bar, that the food scraps portion is a very small green sliver on it.
That's all that we're going to get with the pilot.
That's just the pilot.
That's just the pilot, yeah.
I'd be very curious for this, and maybe we don't know this exactly, maybe that's the problem, but for this 100% bar, what percentage of it do we expect to be food scraps? What percentage do we expect to be yard cuttings, so on and so forth? And you know, for cardboard, we currently capture that in the recycling system.
Yep.
But trying to break that out, I think would be helpful, if only because it leads me to my next question. My next question goes back to, oh, that was a good question. Can I, very short. The question for me is, what is the most valuable material that can help us to incentivize ourselves to look at what we can recover? So if that most valuable material is cardboard, then what can we do to make sure we get as much cardboard as possible to help bolster this program and do the easy work up front?
That is largely dependent on the end stream, the market, and that changes and fluctuates. There's glass demand, there's cardboard demand, there's other things that go up and down. That is why it is so important for us to develop and partner with the private sector, who has a much better gauge and reading on market volatility. But that is something where if we create this assortment of materials and have the capacity to move or reuse or recover and just have all of this there, they can sort of pick what's the best one at this moment versus what we have and create sort of a mixture of what the best business model is going to be with that.
Okay. Can I request as a, for the committee, a breakdown of, I would say at least the top 10 materials that would sort of fit the market desires?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd be very curious if we can, to the degree possible, figure out what capacity we have to recover those in our waste stream.
Yeah, we can get you a waste breakdown. We've done waste sorts, and we can get that to you.
That'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on the capital budget question, it looks like the proposal also only has $3 million in for the landfill, meaning we're not investing in the landfill ever again after this year.
That is specifically for, if I have to look at it, yeah, because we have a trust fund that's already been, there's still money in the trust fund, so I believe that is to another pot.
Mr. Director, I can take that.
Oh, go ahead.
Every year in the budget, in the operating budget, we've been setting aside money in order to fulfill requirements post landfill, like when we have to close it. And so there's money, in a trust fund for the landfill to be, once it's closed, that to meet all the EPA guidelines around capping. I'm not really sure about the technical terms, but making sure that it's safe and that we can retire it in the appropriate manner.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's good to know. This is just to try to maintain it at least until the next 14 years with $3 million. Is that what I'm reading here?
No, that's for the closure fund. So we set aside, it's landfill closure because we have a perpetual responsibility, basically.
Basically, okay.
To cap it, to track it, the leachate, the methane emissions, all of that stuff. So that's what that's for. The budget team has set that up so that we build that up so that we can maintain that over time.
Got it, okay, thank you. Real quick, last question about the tipping fees to follow up on Madam Chair's question. That the 40%, it was 40% like people are using the landfill less as a result of the increase.
Yes.
And is that because our tipping fees now are the same as everywhere else, and so now they're going to the landfill that's closest?
That is our belief. And
I just don't want it to end up in the alleys is my question.
No. They're going to other landfills. That's what we believe is happening. Because
Do we
have not
know
seen-
that? How do we find that out?
I will check. I'm not sure exactly how we know or if we know, but I can.
Can I
certainly
make
look
that a
into
committee request, Madam Chair?
We'd have to do that.
By the next hearing that we should, or at least the next few weeks, we should know kind of what that
Absolutely,
is.
yeah.
That would be super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so
Madam
much. Councilman Blanchard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No question, just a short comment that when the chair expresses a clear desire for the contract with to not be renewed, she certainly speaks for me as well. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you so much. All right, my last question is if you are, my last question has to do with the remainder of the zero waste goals since adoption of the sustainability plan. Do we have specific targets that have been met, have been not met, and where we're falling short?
Yes, we do. We track that and we do report our progress on several different actions in our waste sections of our sustainability plan and our climate action plan on an annual basis. I don't have specific numbers in terms of the percentage of the waste actions. I'm happy to get that information to you. But I would say waste has been one of the sections where we've seen along that 5-point kind of like scale, we've seen a significant amount of progress over the past 5 years. And we expect the 2025 report will also show a tremendous amount of progress based on some of the work that DPW has been doing. But we're happy to get you, and we had the image up from the presentation. I think in the climate action plan, there's about 20 or so actions related to waste. And we do have some progress to make there on those newer actions, admittedly, so.
And so, thank you so much for that, Director. If we could have the specific progress to date, that would be great. And then ETA on when the 2025 report will be released.
Yeah, absolutely. No
Perfect, thank you so much. All right, colleagues, now we're gonna go into public testimony. I know that there is one in room, and I know we also have some online as well. So, Ms. Wilson, if you can come to the podium, you will have 2 minutes to testify. Thank you, ma'am. And if you could press the button, yep, with the person, there you go.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee. Thank you to Madam Chair Porter for the opportunity to address you. My name is Ann Wilson. I live in the 14th District. And I want to say I'm really excited to hear about all the progress the city's making towards zero waste. It's amazing, and I just want to see more of that. And having been involved in this issue for several years, as you know, there is a really serious issue of trust in terms of what is going to happen with that incinerator. And I really appreciate Madam Chair's questions regarding the closure of the incinerator and how that's going to happen. Regarding the $3 million for the development of Bowley's Quarters, so I appreciate there's a need to have thoughtful pilot programs to understand how this is actually going to roll out, what's the best way to develop that project. But when I start hearing language like market volatility, watching for the revenue streams, being concerned about how the economics and so forth, that sends a signal that the priority is not necessarily shutting down the incinerator for the benefit of public health and all the other reasons we know it should be shut down. And so I'd really, if that $3 million is not going in this year, I think that DPW or the council, whoever is the person to do this, needs to make a public statement about what the timeline actually is to get to 2031. What is the timeline? We know you need pilot projects. We know it doesn't make sense to try to start spending money when there's no plan, but there should be a plan. And so would really like to see that, and that is would be a really important step toward building trust. And I will just flag that, as you know, down in Montgomery County, the council, I was in Montgomery County a little over a year ago today, where I watched the county council look at a choice between shutting down their incinerator and having to make some very difficult choices about what to do with their trash, and spending $100 million to make that facility safe enough so that they could continue to use it. And now here we have, in the last 3 months, there have been 2 incidents of needing to shut down the boilers in that incinerator because of extremely dangerous dioxin releases and releases of other toxic materials. And, you know, the city of Baltimore would like to be able to trust our DPW and our city council and our mayor that that is not what is going to be what happens to us. But I would love to hear more about actually how that's going to become reality, and that we're not going to get stuck again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Very
Thank
wonderful
you.
testimony. All right, now we also have a few online as well. We have Greg Sawtell. If you can raise your hand, you are able to come off mute.
There we go. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, Greg, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, everybody. Councilwoman Porter and the entire council here in DPW. Greg Sawtell with the South Baltimore Community Land Trust and the Community of Curtis Bay Association. I just want to run through a quick timeline here that I think clarifies the big picture and where we need to go. So from 1993 until 2025, the city of Baltimore was holding an artificially low, that's the city budget office's language, tip fee at the landfill at $60 per ton. That's less than half of what was being charged elsewhere, $120 per ton. Another way of thinking about that is the city of Baltimore, for still to unknown reasons to the community, was making it incredibly cheap and creating an incentive to dump at the landfill if you're a large commercial hauler. Then in 2024, community members launched a civil rights complaint using Title VI. And in 2025, the city, again, for the first time in about 35 years, changed its tip fee at the landfill. Almost overnight, we now know, in the 2 months since that's been in effect, we've seen a 50% reduction in waste from large commercial haulers. We have no reason to believe that's going into alleys. It's large commercial haulers are making different economic choices because finally the city has adjusted the landfill. Another way of viewing that is it's changed the way it values the communities and the health of people in South Baltimore for the first time. Now, what it hasn't done is adjusted the tip fee, the cost for the most concerning material going into the landfill, the 140,000 tons of ash from Bresco, which includes lead, mercury, dioxins. That's being trucked on a daily basis from Bresco to QRL. Okay, so my question that I'd like to be made part of the official record is DPW continuing to attempt to get permission to make use of that hazardous material as alternative landfill cover?
And Greg, keep in mind, testimony does not require a response from the agency.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, do we have any others on for public testimony? If you could raise your hand. I see Carlos on there. Carlos, would you like to testify? Carlos?
Yes. Hello,
Okay, great. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, and Councilwoman Porter and members of the committee. My name is Carlos Sanchez, and I live in South Baltimore near the Quarantine Road landfill and the two city incinerators. And just like Greg, I'm also here to enter several critical questions, some that he already mentioned, into the public record as you consider Baltimore's path towards zero waste. And like Greg mentioned, for decades from 1990s until 2025, Baltimore kept landfill tip fees for the Quarantine Road landfill really low, far below surrounding jurisdictions. And these decisions have directly harmed my community's health and quality of life. And so my first question would be this: why the city or DPW kept landfill pricing so low for large commercial haulers for so long? And, during those same years, the Department of Public Works cited shrinking landfill capacity to justify a multi-million-dollar contract with the Brusco incinerator, which is now operated by Wind Waste Innovation. And if capacity was truly the concern, why maintain pricing that caused the landfill to fill faster? And, we also know, like Greg mentioned, the Brusco incinerator produces ash containing hazardous substances like lead, mercury, and dioxins. And so, wanted to see why is it that the city is still charging a discounted rate to dispose of that ash? And of course, how is it managed? Is it placed in line cells? What prevents it from becoming airborne and impacting nearby communities and neighborhoods while it's at the landfill? And, if we are serious about zero waste, we must be serious about transparency, equity, and correcting policies that distort the market and benefiting private haulers while concentrating environmental burdens in South Baltimore. And so my final question is that why, after 15 years of youth advocacy and community organizing, did the city or DPW continue to make it so cheap to dump trash in South Baltimore through its pricing policies, and why were our communities valued less than those in surrounding counties? And thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And in the spirit of transparency and flexibility, Greg Sawtel's question and Carlos' question, we're just going to place them as official committee requests so the department can provide a written response to those two individuals. Thank you. Any other persons that want to testify today? Dante, I see you're on.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Oh, yep, we can hear you. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, great. Good morning. My name is Dante Davidson Swinton. When hearings regarding waste management in the city come up, they are often missing the most key question: how much does it cost to move towards zero waste and away from the incinerator versus the status quo? I'm going to try to answer that as quickly as possible. The city estimated around 2018 that the cost of a two-phase expansion to QRL would be around $100 million, or $117 million in today's dollars. However, we could build a 425,000-ton material recovery facility the size of San Francisco's MRF for approximately $63 million. Coincidentally, this is about the same amount of waste sent to the incinerator from public and private sources in the city each year. We could build a 180,000-ton composting facility for around $17 million. Combined, that's still much cheaper than the landfill expansion. Compare this to the $111 million it would cost Wind Waste just to modernize its nitrogen oxides pollution controls. The city budgets around $12 million annually to incinerate around 200,000 tons. If we captured and sold just the aluminum and steel cans, PET bottles and jars, HDPE, and cardboard in that tonnage, the city would garner over $17 million annually. That's a $29 million swing because we chose to stop burning money every day. Incineration produces one job per 10,000 tons of material managed. Recycling produces 36. But reuse and remanufacturing produces 300 jobs per 10,000 tons of material managed. It is not logical from an economic or environmental standpoint to stick with the incinerator at all. A MRF could be built in 2 years, as well as a composting facility, and it's time we make the right and just decision for our city. Finally, EPA states that approximately 75% of materials could be reused, composted, or recycled. So that means we need to rethink or redesign at least 25% of the stream regarding the waste hierarchy and the Councilman Conway's question from earlier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dante. Really appreciate it. Are there any other persons wishing to testify today? All right. Any persons in the chamber that are willing to testify? All right, hearing and seeing none, we'll end public testimony for today. Just circling back to the original intent of this legislative oversight hearing, we are aiming to make zero waste as efficient, productive as possible in the city of Baltimore. I thank you for the progress to date. The Office of Sustainability, thank you so much for leading that effort. But we still have a lot more work to do, and so this council, particularly this committee, is working in collaboration with you all to figure out these ideas. We're not asking you all to come up with these ideas on your own. We're asking for a true partnership. We understand that council members have a role to play as it relates to budget, as it relates to advocacy, and so use this committee as an arm to move the needle forward for true reduction of waste in our city and true sustainability plans for our city. So thank you all so much for joining today. I really appreciate it, and stay tuned for the next one. Thank you.